We're starting today with developments and follow-up on the situation in Gaza and Israel. And this is going to be a little bit of a different segment. I hope you'll bear with me and let's go through. And there's some structure to this, but there's a lot of things that are just sort of on my mind that we're going to talk about. So let me first just contextualize what we on the show have kind of been experiencing with the audience over the last week. Last week, I told you that there were a number of people I believe to be a relatively small portion of my audience, but certainly very loud, who are really angry with me, who feel that I am getting it wrong on the Hamas terrorist attack, that I am missing context, that I am just a reflexive defender of Benjamin Netanyahu because I'm Jewish, which of course I'm not a defender at all of Netanyahu. I'm actually a critic, and I've been a critic of Netanyahu for as long as I've been doing this show. And some people, probably now about 24 people, canceled their paid memberships to the show. And I mentioned this last week, and I said, listen, to me, I hold the views I hold because I'm a leftist, because I'm a progressive. I made every effort to explain that, and some people just don't accept it. And either because they feel that I don't know, I guess deserve to have funding taken away because of my opinion, or because they can't support a show with which they don't agree 100%, or for whatever reason, and it is their right, a couple dozen people have actually canceled their memberships to the show, and that's sad to see. At the same time, I am flattered and humbled that we had record new members come in after I explained what was going on. Over 400 new paid members signed up over the weekend. It's genuinely flattering. I'm completely humbled, and it is really a pleasure to see that there are people who, based on the signups and based on the emails I've gotten, kind of seem to understand what it is that my perspective is and value it to some degree. I want to look at a few of the emails that I received. Here's one from Teddy, who said, I'm a new member because of your uncompromising honesty about Israel-Palestine. David, I've always been fairly liberal, but I mostly listen to conservative media. First heard you on the PBD show. I'm not a fan of PBD, but I like listening to people I disagree with. Your show is the first political show I've ever paid any money to. And it's because I respect principled viewpoints. Your view on this issue is hard for many on the left to accept. Keep up the good work. Damien wrote in saying, shocked by these confused progressives. David, I'm just shocked by people emailing you claiming to be progressive and defending the abhorrent Hamas terrorist attack. I expect this brain rot on the right, but not the left. I increased my membership to counter people canceling support. Thank you. Jennifer wrote in, David, the progressives that have renounced their membership aren't progressives. There's nothing progressive about their hard and fast rules. You know what isn't progressive? Being openly understanding and empathetic to raping, burning, and decapitating by terrorists. So maybe there is one hard and fast rule of progressivism. Thanks for all you do. I'm not going anywhere. We then got another email from Stuart in Australia. David and team, I just watched your most recent show, which indicated a few people canceled subscriptions. I appreciate your balanced coverage, so I thought I'd get another membership. Keep up the good work. Liza wrote in, says, new member here. David, I've been a fan of your YouTube channel for many years. I always told myself I couldn't afford to donate to my favorite content creators, but I saw your video about the negative responses over your Hamas criticism. They're a terrorist group who've committed atrocious acts. Of course there's context. I can't imagine defending them. It's repugnant. I'm glad to support you now. Please keep doing your good work. And lastly, Pete said, David, thank you for your coverage of the terrorist attacks in Israel. I just signed up as a paying member. Huge fan, grateful for your voice. I will gladly reach out and get you more members from my network. So listen, everybody who canceled, absolutely fine. Everybody who signed up, I appreciate it. But I want to now take the time to mention a few things that I think are important. I hope that at least on these things, we will all be in agreement. First of all, a bunch of people wrote in saying, David, you are simply biased because you're Jewish, not religiously. I'm culturally Jewish, ethnically Jewish. And so I saw dozens of comments and got a handful of emails from people saying, they like me well enough, but on this issue, I can't be trusted because I'm Jewish and therefore biased. This is a really scary right-wing argument that the right has used for decades to dismiss the opinions of people they don't want to listen to. It's a bad argument, and I'll tell you why. In whatever way I am biased for being Jewish, you would have to argue any Palestinian is also biased for being Palestinian. And what that gets us to is, so I guess you can't be Jewish or Palestinian to be able to comment without bias. So therefore, who is it that we're listening to? The right wingers used to say this about LGBT rights. They would go, of course the gays want all sorts of stuff. They're biased because they're gay. We can't listen to them. And we all on the left said, that's crazy. During the Iraq War, the warmongers would sometimes say, if you haven't served, you don't get to have an opinion about whether we should invade Iraq or not, because you're biased against the military by default. And we said that's a bad argument. So this idea, by definition, definitionally, this is an identity politics disaster. I'm culturally Jewish, so therefore I can't possibly say anything of value here. You've got to apply that as well to Palestinians. And of course, it's crazy because everyone with an opinion is biased. When people say, David, you're biased, this is an opinion show. That's right. Anybody giving an opinion is biased. You're simply saying you don't like my opinion. You don't like that my bias is different than your bias. You're saying, I don't want to listen or support you because on this issue, you've come to a different conclusion. Now, the truth is, it should be okay not to agree with everybody all the time. There's many people in the audience who disagree with me on GMO. I've looked at the science on GMO foods. There doesn't seem to be any health concern with eating GMO foods. Pesticides, sure, but there doesn't, and some people in the audience disagree. All right. Many of the people in my audience who oppose looking at nuclear power as a bridge to renewables are basing their opinion on the safety of nuclear power on 50-year-old technology. I have a different view because if we did new nuclear, it would be based on new and different technology. Maybe we disagree. It's okay to disagree. So the concern to me is people who just want me to have the same opinion they have and only support in that case. That's totally fine if you look for shows where you agree with the host on every issue. I don't find that super compelling. It's just some people have different opinions. Now let's get to context. There are folks who have recently said, David, you have not given context in talking about this terrorist attack. You haven't talked about Israeli settlements or Benjamin Netanyahu or whatever else the case may be. It is true that not every time I talk about this issue, I give my opinion about every element. If people want me to, I can include that stuff every time I talk about this issue. I have been unanimously against the Netanyahu administration for as long as it has existed. I believe Netanyahu benefits from not having peace. There will likely never be real peace under Netanyahu. There also will never be peace under Hamas. And then when I say that, people go, oh, but you shouldn't even talk about the Hamas part because the problem is only is, well, but now I mentioned Netanyahu and that I'm against him and you're still not happy. Settlements. I'm against settlement policy in Israel. I was against shutting off electricity and water to Gazans who are mostly innocent. I can say this stuff every time, but what I find is when I give context, people don't like the context or find it insufficient. I could also argue that there are people writing to me who are also not considering context. I've had conversations with them where I go, you know, the worst time to get a good deal is when you're losing a war. And at this point, it can't be said that Hamas is winning this thing for Palestinians. And if you go back to the 1947 partition plan, it was a 50-50 divide of the land, which at this point would be a fantastic deal, I believe, for Palestinians. They rejected it in 47 because they believed Israel should not exist and should have zero land. And then you talk about the 2000 Camp David summit, and you talk about Bill Clinton's attempted negotiation and the rejection of all of these deals. That's part of the context as well. But David, you won't say that in 67 and 73, Israel stole more land. Well, that's missing context. Israel was attacked by Egypt and Syria in 67. And so they defended and were able to claim land in war as happens. Does that mean I love it? No, but to say that on a whim in 67, Israel said, let's take some land, isn't what happened. In 1973, Israel was attacked by Egypt and Syria, and Israel defended itself and made gains. So whenever people say there's missing context, you're also missing context that's relevant to understanding the history. And so at the end of the day, There's a movement from the left that I think is misguided, which is to say, this is super simple. This is a simple issue. And when people try to interject nuance and say, you really have to understand 47-48 and 67 and 73 and the negotiations under. No, you're trying to defend Israel by making it seem complicated when really it's simple. Israel's bad, period. That is not the nuanced sort of thinking that I encourage. And if you don't like that, then this probably isn't the show for you. There are shows which just will tell you Israel's uniquely bad, period, and that's it. As far as the happenings over the last few days, the water was shut off. I was against that. It's back on thanks to Joe Biden. Reminds us of the importance of who we elect president. Do you believe that Trump would have pressured Israel to turn the Gazan water back on? No. Reminds us of the importance of who we elect here. There was this 24-hour warning given to Gazans to leave. Of course, leave to go where? They can go south, but obviously Egypt doesn't want them crossing the border either. So it was a pretty wild situation. However, the 24 hours went by. As of this moment, there has not been this massive ground assault, which is good because I would be against that. But hundreds of thousands of Palestinians did move south, even though Hamas, completely disregarding their safety, said simply stay. And then very last thing, for the dozen or so people who emailed last night, Sunday night, and said, David, why haven't you talked about this thing that happened Saturday or this thing that happened Sunday? Again, I'm not avoiding this topic. We don't do shows on weekends. We're a Monday to Friday show, so we can cool it with the, you didn't talk about this thing from Saturday, so therefore it's because you're trying to obfuscate or hide it. So that's where we are right now. I am flattered to clearly have most of the audience with me. I'm humbled by 400 people who said, canceling David over this, that makes no sense. So I really appreciate that.